Hiya crafters, Amy here, and I have a fun technique to share with you today. It involves ink pad swiping and dry embossing with a stencil. Here's the stencil I'm going to use. It's called Beads from Colorful Life Designs, and I do have a coupon if you do shop for some stencils, so you can save on your complete order. I have the Party Collection Date Night Mini Ink Pads from Catherine Pooler, some cardstock, and here are a couple photos of the finished cards that I'm going to make for you today. You can see they're super bright and colorful. They have this awesome embossed texture from the stenciling, but really the design couldn't be easier. It's super easy and it comes together in a snap. So here I'm showing you, I'm just going to use these mini ink pads. And if you aren't familiar, Catherine Pooler's ink pads are foam and they're super juicy, so they work really well for this sort of ink swiping technique. And I'm just kind of running it right along the card panel. This is an A2 size piece of 110 pound Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, and I want to use every one of these gorgeous colors from this set. So just kind of working sort of in a rainbow order here, but you know, not starting with the reddish color and working down the panel. Now you can do this if you have the full size ink pads, but you might just have to hold it on its side a little bit so that the stripe isn't too thick. But honestly, you could do this with any ink pad that you have if it's kind of on the juicier side. So I'm just working through the yellow and the orange, just kind of loosely covering the whole panel because this is what I'm kind of picturing in the finished design. Now here is how I dry emboss with a stencil. I have a Spellbinders Platinum 6, and I'm going to use my platform here, which kind of gives you instructions but doesn't really tell you how to do this specific technique. And then this is the sandwich that I found that works best for me for this machine. I have a metal shim, which you can see is a little bit beat up, but it does the job. I have a rubber mat that goes next. Next up will be the paper with the stencil on top of it. Now you can tape it together, which you'll see I do with my low tack mint tape that just kind of reinforces it and makes sure that it doesn't shift while you're kind of running it through. So it's a good idea if you're able just to kind of tape that together from the back. But use whatever sandwich works for your particular embossing machine. It's going to vary from one machine to the next. So I kind of play around and figure out what's going to give me the most pressure. You can actually do it without the metal shim, but I find that it's even more of a subtle design. You don't get quite the imprint. So I tend to go a little bit more pressure rather than less, just because I really want to make sure that that imprint kind of comes through. Now it's not going to be as dramatic or bold as like a 3D embossing folder, but it is just another awesome fun way to use your stencils. So if you guys know me, you know I love stencils for their versatility. You can do so many different things with them, but you can see the design definitely came through here. I'm just going to remove the mint tape carefully as to not rip my cardstock, but you can see it just gives you this nice subtle interest on the back of the panel that just kind of pops up the little colorful stripes and just kind of adds to the card overall. So at this point, I'm kind of deciding I want to do a second card, but kind of an opposite design. And I'm just going to take another piece of that same white cardstock, and this time I decide to spritz it with some water. Now, as you can see, this is an optional step, but I do really think it helped to kind of really bend the fibers of the paper and help it kind of take the design a little bit more dramatically than the one with the ink swipes across it. So there are some instances where you probably can't introduce water, like if you have water reactive inks like I did on the last panel. You may be able to spritz a little bit of water on the back side of the panel, but you know, use your judgment on that and what you're able to do. But you can see it did definitely imprint it, I think, a little bit deeper on this plain white one, and I think that's definitely because of the water. So just play around with your machine and whatever sandwich it calls for that technique to figure out, you know, the best sort of pressure. And it's gonna probably vary depending on how thick your stencil is, how thick your cardstock is, and even honestly kind of how you load it up in there. I think sometimes if you kind of angle it, you can get a different effect. So just take a note down on what works. If you're like me, you'll forget the sandwich, so maybe make yourself a little post-it note or something to stick to your die cutting machine to remind you what sandwich worked best for this technique, and then you have another built-in fun way to use all your stencils. So here you can see I'm doing another panel, and this is for die cutting. I didn't cover the full front of it because I just wanted it big enough to kind of work with this happy birthday die. So this is the focal point and the sentiment for both of these cards. This is a Lawn Fun huge imposing die. It works really well for an A2 size card. So I'm just going to carefully remove that and pop out all the little pieces parts. Now, if you're a patient person, which I am not, you could use this leftover panel with all this ink swiping on it and turn it into yet another card. That's kind of what I was thinking initially. I was going to keep all these little innards from, you know, all the A's and the B's and the P's. I was thinking, oh, I'll turn this into another card some other time. So I'm saving all these little bits. And then I remember when I popped the whole thing out, it's just like a massive hole in the middle of the panel, because then there's all the little cutouts in between the letters. And then I thought, let's be real, Amy, you're not going to do it. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's not going to happen, right? So I decided to poke out all these little bits, and then I accept the truth that it's not going to happen. But either way, this die is super fun because even the tittle is attached, so you don't have any little rogue pieces parts running around. It's just a nice big connected sturdy die cut, which makes a great focal point on the front of an A2 size card. See, look at that big gaping hole. Nope, not going to happen. So that ends up going in the bin. But now I decide that I want to do the opposite for the colorful background that is embossed. So I'm just going to mint tape this down on a piece of A2 size white cardstock and then cut it out in white. And you can see I attached all this together to card bases. That's the same cardstock in A2 size, and then I glued down the sentiments. You could absolutely die cut these again with some sticky back foam and really pop up the happy birthday, or do little fiddly bits of foam tape if that's your jam. But I thought they had enough texture with the embossing element, so I just liquid glued the sentiments right down onto those panels. And now I'm adding some adorable little blingage from Doodle's Paper Playground. These are like clear bubbles and they look like water droplets. And I did 5 on each card, 3 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and that's going to finish the design. So you can see it's not lacking in color or texture. It's got interest, but it really did come together quickly. So if you can figure out the sandwich, or you already know the sandwich, then this is a fun way to kind of stretch your supplies and make some easy peasy birthday cards. So I hope you enjoyed these techniques. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing. I have some more videos below here for you to check out, and I really appreciate the time you spent with me today. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.